Okay, so today I'm going to pull the axles off this transmission. I need to replace the nose cone and probably some seals. I know the input shaft seal was leaking, so I'm going to go through this whole thing and pull apart some things. I'll show you how the axles come off. This transmission, if you haven't seen any other videos, this transmission we took out of a dune buggy chassis, a deserter that we're working on. So I already had the drums off so that I could pull the parking brake cables. And unfortunately, I forgot to drain this transmission before I pulled it out, and it's probably going to leak all over the place. So I can drain it. Once I get these shafts off, I can probably pick up the transmission and, kind of get it over a pan and drain it. But for now, it's probably going to leak a bit. So the first thing we need to do is we need to pull these 4 14mm bolts out, and this cap will pull off, and then I can get the backing plate off with everything still attached to it. Sometimes these caps pull off real easy. You just kind of give the backing plate a whack. Sometimes they don't. They get stuck. This one pulled off pretty easy. So we pull this cap off. I'm going to stick it inside the drum to get it out of the way. And then this entire backing plate can pull off. And that's going to have everything stay with it. Inside of here, you'll see there's a bearing. There's this bearing spacer in here, and in order to get this bearing out, probably going to need a puller. Sometimes they'll pop right out. I've had cars you pull this apart and it just pops right out. I'm pulling an O-ring off of here just to get it out of the way, reduce drag. I'm guessing that this is going to be stuck in here. So I have this tool. It's a puller. I bought it off of Samba. I'll post a link to the seller that I got it from. Works pretty good, no complaints. And the way it works is it's got these hooks on either end. And what they do is they go in here and they actually hook into the slot that the ball rolls around on. Some of these, like in the case of this has a plastic race in here. So I'm just going to destroy it. I'm going to pull that out just to get good access to it. And you see all the balls kind of just roll around after that. So let me get this spacer. The spacer has to be on because it has to fill the gap between these two so that it can't pop out. And I need to back this tool off. Anytime you use a puller, it's always a good idea to lube the threads so that they don't kind of get bound up. So the way this tool works, I'm going to get this in on each side. Sometimes you have to pull an arm off it to get it in there. If the spacer is stuck, I have the spacer slid up. I need to back the tool off even more. And because that had that plastic cage in it that I pulled out, I need to push the balls around inside there so that they don't get in the way. All right, then I'm going to slide the spacer down, and I'll show you the whole thing once I get this set up. Okay, some of this off. All right, so this is how this looks when it's set up. You've got spacer in the middle. Each one of these hooks is inside of there, sitting inside basically the race of where the ball rolls around on. And then I'm just going to tighten this up, and with any luck, this bearing will pop out relatively easy. Get you set back up here. It's a very good idea to drain these transmissions. If you have time, drain it for a while before you start pulling these things apart, because it is a mess. So. And you can do this job while this is on the vehicle pretty easily. See if I can hang on to this enough to pull this the rest of the way. Once you get it, there we go. Once you get it down past the, where the splines start, usually the whole thing will just kind of pop off like that just did. But there's your bearing. You see the ball bearings in there. This is a made in Germany. This is kind of what I suspected. So the other side was a bear to get this bearing out. I started on that side. I stopped and came over here to show you this side instead, because I figured it'd just be a little less swearing. So I've got this side out, but these bearings are probably original to this transmission and have never been out of this. Once you get that out, you're gonna have a washer, then another spacer. And this spacer does have, if you look at it, it does. It has a tapered edge on the inside, and that tapered edge goes in towards the axle, and you'll see when I get the axle out, the actual axle actually has a lip on it, because now there's nothing supporting this axle. So let's put all that aside. All right, so let me reset you and I'll get to the next part. Okay, so I got to a point where I ended up lifting the transmission on blocks to get some of the fluid out, because it just started leaking everywhere on the other side real bad. So I just wanted to get it out so that I could get this other side off and show you that. Hopefully I don't flip it over. But basically what we have to do is there's 6 nuts that go around this flange. We've got the bearing off, we've got all the parts out from inside of it. And what we need to do is slide this axle tube off of the axle. And to do that, we've got to separate this flange in here. And these are 13 millimeter. They're probably going to be pretty gummy just from being underneath a car for 60 years or more and rolling around with dirt and grease and everything else that just kind of comes off between the engine and the transmission itself. So you may have to some of these you're going to have to clean the garbage out of here to get into it. Not a big deal though. This one's pretty soft. I've done some that this grease is like petrified and it just doesn't want to come off. All of these nuts are getting stuck in the socket because of all the stuff on them. So not a big deal. I just use one of the studs to thread them back onto one of the studs, and then it usually will just slide right off. Okay. These nuts, each one of them is going to have a washer. I try to save them. Sometimes they're just buried in grime and you can't really get after them. And you just got to pull the shaft off or pull the housing off. And it is what it is. I'm hoping I can pull this axle. I have the other side already off. I'm hoping I can pull this off without knocking the whole thing over. So let's try that. All right. Shake my washers out. And I've got gear oil coming out everywhere. Okay, so I didn't flip it over, so that's good. Next thing to do here is there's this plastic daisy sunflower. I don't know, everybody's got a different name for it. All it is just, it's basically a bushing that everything slides on. You generally, as long as they're not bound up or you know, got big cuts in them or anything like that, you generally can reuse them. I always do. So I usually just pull them off, put them off to the side to take care of them, and then get back to what you're doing. A mess. Okay, so the next thing here, and I don't know if I can show you this very easily. You'll see a lot of guys will pull this entire side cover off to get into here. I generally don't. It's a little more tricky to do it without pulling it off, but I've never pulled one of these off to pull an axle. And let me just see if I can show you. Inside of here, there is a snap ring. If I can get you at the right angle, you can see the snap ring inside there. All you're doing is you're pulling that snap ring out, and then there's a giant washer sitting underneath that. And then this axle shaft should slide out. Basically, you just need the correct snap ring pliers, and I end up using some smaller ones that I have that tend to work a little bit better than the big ones that actually are supposed to fit this. And you just got to kind of work this thing out of here. Sometimes it gets stuck. Sometimes you slide off it. I'm actually using too small of tips on this. And that's why it's kind of getting stuck, popping back and forth like that. And my shaft is not in the right location here on top of that. Okay. There we go. So we've got the snap ring clear. The washer actually started popping out too. Everything's coming out. Okay. So here's our snap ring. If I can get this off here. There we go. All right. So we got our snap ring out. Then we got this big washer, and you got to basically straighten this axle out to get anything out, because the hole is just big enough for everything to slide out of. Get the washer out. The washer has a tooth on one side that fits into a spot in the transmission, stops it from moving around. And then this axle should just slide right out of here, which this one is. So your axle has this big fat end on it, and inside of the transmission, which I'll pull them out, is fulcrum plates. And these sit on either side. You can probably pull the whole cup out. So here's part of your differential. And here's your fulcrum plates. Sit on either side. If I can hang on to them, they're slippery. Sit on either side of this. And they allow this axle to rotate up, down, and side to side. The axle on its own is, because it's got this flat edge here, it can rotate this direction relatively easy, but going this way and this way needs that fulcrum plate to rotate on. And obviously it holds it all together too. It's not just in there for that, but that's pretty much it. It's a messy job. a lot of this oil, if I had drained this transmission like I should have ahead of time, I wouldn't have so much oil spilling out everywhere. But that's pretty much it, pulling those out of there. Next up, after this completely drains out, is to change out this nose cone.